This show is brought to you by the All Pro Nation Radio Network. Be sure to like and subscribe and check us out online at allpronation.com, where fans have a voice.
Here's what we got for you on episode 10 of the Sports Greeks podcast. We've got the National League Central preview for baseball. We've got Roger Goodell's $2 million gift to Jerry Jones, how the Browns are being the Browns. We're also going to talk about Kirk Cousins' Final Four, or actually is it really just a Final Two? And we've got some other things to discuss. So the Sports Greeks podcast is going to start right now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sports Greeks podcast. This is your host, Victor Logothetis. Hope everybody had a great weekend. I know Friday on the East Coast was a mess as that nor'easter came through here, dumping rain, snow, and all kinds of high winds and knocking trees and stuff down. So if anybody was affected by that, in my listening audience, hopefully the branches have been picked up, the trees have been moved, and the power is back on. I know it's sunny here today. We're in Wilmington, Delaware, but the sunshine is not going to last for much longer. We're expecting another big storm tomorrow. So if you're listening to me through our Libsyn feed, that's great. Our Apple podcast, welcome and thanks for downloading and listening. And we're also have some listeners coming to us from the newly formed APN Radio Network. And thanks if you're picking up the show there. That's great as well. The APN Radio Network is subset of the allpronation.com website that I contribute to. So let's get some of the other business stuff out of the way. The Twitter handle is at BigGreek24. Please follow me there. I do post stuff from time to time. The email address is victorlogo13@gmail.com. We have a Facebook page called The Sports Greek. And as previously mentioned, I do write for both allpronation.com and phillysportsblogs.com. So we have a big show today for you, as the introduction indicated. We're going to get to the NL Central preview in just a little while, but we're going to talk some other things that occurred first. So it would appear that the two big boys that can't play together in the sandbox in the NFL, Commissioner Roger Goodell and Jerry Jones, are at it again. Last week, Goodell announced that they were going to seek $2 million from the Cowboys to help recoup court costs associated both with the dragging on by Jones of getting Goodell's contract taken care of, as well as the Ezekiel Elliott fiasco. Jerry Jones' response, rather than just paying the fine, they're going to appeal it. I believe the appeal was heard, if not yesterday, today. We'll see how that all works out. I know, for one, I'm tired of this stuff. Jones, in my opinion, should just pay it. He's part of an organization. It's not the JFL, not the Jones FL, the Jerry FL. It's the NFL, the National Football League. And, he probably should have just had Ezekiel sit out last year when the suspension was handed down, just taken it. Instead, they dragged it out. That cost the other owners money in terms of court fees and stuff like that, trying to fight the appeals and everything. So, just in my opinion, just pay the damn thing and move on. But we'll see what happens with the appeal and see where that goes. I do find it very humorous, however, that Jones has to appeal to the guy that levied the fine in the first place. So we'll definitely see how this ruling goes out. It's evident that Jones did not bankroll Ezekiel Elliott's appeal. They're going to prove that in front of Goodell during the appeal session. So again, we'll see how that all works out. And as far as I'm concerned, these two guys just need to learn to get along. A couple other NFL items, one of which is newly minted GM John Dorsey of the Browns said last week that he would certainly listen to offers for the first overall pick that the Browns currently hold. So different general manager, same rhetoric. And I understand listening to offers and actually accepting one certainly are two totally different things. But after a 1-31 run over 2 years, the fact you're bringing the same head coach back, the Browns need to make a splash in this draft. They could take a quarterback at 1. They could, then come back and pick at 4. What I would think would actually be a good thing. They could actually kill kind of two birds with one stone here. Take Saquon Barkley first. This kid, 54 catches at Penn State last year. He ran a 4.40 at the combine. It looks like he's absolutely the real thing. I mean, there's been a lot of talk. You don't need to take a running back real high. The Cowboys took Elliott high, and it paid off for them. And I understand the Browns won't have the great offensive line right away that the Cowboys had for Ezekiel, but you could come back. You could take Barkley with the first pick. If he doesn't go there, I have a feeling the Giants will take him at 2 anyway. Then with the 4th pick, you take the best quarterback that's left on the board. Rosen, Allen, Darnold, any of those guys could still be there. The Colts should be picking 3rd in front of them after the Giants pick. And you got to figure if the Browns do take Barkley with the first pick, the Giants probably do grab a quarterback, and it's probably Josh Rosen out of UCLA. He has said he'd like to play there and like to learn under Eli Manning. So we'll see. But the Browns could theoretically get a stud running back and a franchise quarterback, not just in the same draft, in the first 4 picks of the same draft. And, just speaking of quarterbacks and Super Bowls and everything else, if you go back to the Elway Marino draft back in '83, there's only 4 quarterbacks taken in the top 5 that have won a Super Bowl. Just 4. John Elway's one. Troy Aikman's another. Both those guys were taken number 1 overall. And then the Manning brothers. That's it. All the other quarterbacks taken really high, they haven't produced. And again, high, I'm talking top 5, not top 10, not top 15, not first round. I'm talking top 5. Russell Wilson, I think, was a 3rd round pick. Nick Foles, 3rd round pick. So I know Breeze was taken for maybe late first, second, or even 2nd round for his Super Bowl. I know Aaron Rodgers was taken very late in the 1st round by the Packers. Brett Favre was a 2nd round pick. So, there you go. So taking a quarterback in the top 5 picks of any draft is not a surefire, we're going to win the Super Bowl. The other thing with the Browns, too, is they've traded out of those top picks for so long now. They traded the 2nd pick overall a couple years ago to the Eagles. That pick turned out to be Carson Wentz. The Browns didn't think Wentz would be a top 20 quarterback, and they kind of missed on that one. But you just can't keep acquiring draft capital and just keep pushing off every year. There comes a time where you've got to start putting the building blocks in place. And for them this year, this really could be that opportunity. So, again, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but it would seem logical to me. You take Barkley with the first pick. You wait and see what happens. The next couple picks, and at 4, you take the best quarterback that's there. And that's, in my mind, that's what you do. And I think that makes a pretty damn big splash for the Browns and their fans, who are very loyal, who've suffered through, the indignity of losing a ball club and then getting back an expansion team that just, really hasn't done very well in the last 2 years. Has been an embarrassment, quite honestly. 1-31, and you're bringing back the same coach. You did fire the general manager, and you brought in somebody new, but it's time to start doing things right. And I never get tired of saying this, and this is what I'm going to say. The Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles. I'm never going to get tired of saying that. I'll be saying that 5 years from now. Anyway, they've got some issues with the cap. They've got to make some maneuvering. It's been rumored that the Eagles are taking calls on Nick Foles. They want to get more than the 1st and 4th round picks they got for Sam Bradford. So that's what they're trying. That's the price that they've set for Nick Foles. So we'll see how that works out. Vinny Curry could get traded. Vinny Curry's contract could get reworked to try and smooth out some money in the cap. Torrey Smith could go, or again, they could just release him, bring him back on a lesser contract to try and give up some cap room. The issue with Foles for me, you have an opportunity to defend your title, and you don't know what your starting quarterback status is going to be coming up to draft. And before we hear everybody saying trade Foles, get a pick, get whatever, they're not going to get a 1st round pick for Nick Foles. And if they do, it's going to be a very late 1st round pick, because anybody that's going to deal for Nick Foles is going to be a team that feels they can win with Foles at the trigger this year, or if they can extend him the following year. And quite honestly, the only reason the Eagles got what they got for Bradford clearly was because the Vikings were desperate. They just lost their starting quarterback. Bradford was evidently the next best available option for them. And I believe at the time, Norv Turner was the offensive coordinator. Pat Shurmur was I think it was the quarterback's coach. He had a relationship with Bradford, so that also could have had something to do with why the Vikings made that deal to bring Bradford in. They thought they were a Super Bowl contender that year. It didn't work out that way, as it so happens. They were this year, but that's the only reason that happened. That was out of desperation. That was a team that was desperate. It was a week before the season. Bridgewater gets hurt, and they're scrambling around trying to get a quarterback that can step in and play. But again, before we start hearing the cries of, trade Foles, trade Foles, trade Foles, as the Green Bay Packers fans, what last year was like after Aaron Rodgers went down, they did not have a capable backup to step in and win games for him. Ask him how that was. That worked out really well, didn't it? And it happened, I believe, another time Rodgers got hurt. They did not have a capable backup, with the ability to come in and win games for them. Turn back the clock about 15 months ago. Ask Raider fans what it was like not watching Carr starting a playoff game for him. I think they had to go with Matt McGloin. I think was the starting quarterback that day. Ask Dolphin fans. Twice in less than a year. They lost Tannehill right before the playoffs. They're going to end up being 11-5, and Tannehill couldn't start. He got hurt. And then before the season even starts, he got hurt again. They had to bring in Jay Cutler. So, and they were a team with high hopes to get back to the playoffs again. So, ask those three teams what that was like, not having a capable backup to step in and can win some games. The Eagles were very fortunate, and I give Howie Roseman a ton of credit for having a foresight to bring a guy like Foles back in here, a guy that knows this offense, can run this offense, and, it paid huge dividends. You didn't think that Wentz would get hurt, but he did, and Foles stepped in and had a couple shaky games at the end of the season, but a damn nice playoff run. And the other issue with Foles, unfortunately, is as a starter in this league, yes, 13, he had a fantastic year. 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. 2014 comes along, and there are reasons this happened. I believe Kelsey was hurt. I think Johnson got the first suspension. I think he was out for 4 games. I think Jason Peters got hurt that year. So Foles did not have the protection that he had the year before behind the offensive line, and I think he completed less than 60% of his passes, and was the time that he got hurt, I think he had thrown 13 touchdowns to 10 interceptions, but the Eagles were 6-2 at the time, ended up being 9-3 as of Thanksgiving Day, and then went 1-3 to down the stretch. Unfortunately, limped to a 10-6 record and missed the playoffs. And I understand in Roseman's case, you've got some cachet build up now. You won a Super Bowl. Eagles fans aren't going to be as they'll understand a little bit more maybe, but you've got an opportunity now if you keep Foles in the fold. No pun intended. And if Wentz can't play 2, 3, 4 games, you've got a guy that just won your Super Bowl that's going to lead your team out on opening day, and that's awesome to have. We don't know what Nate Sudfeld can be, and I know what they're talking about. They think he can be a starter, everything else, and maybe he can down the road. Maybe he could be a great backup down the road, but we don't know right now if he can or not, and I don't think this is the year to find out going into the season. And, the last thing you want to do is rush Carson Wentz back. Ask the Redskins fans how that worked out with RG3. And Wentz has a very similar injury to what RG3 had. So, you won a Super Bowl. You have an opportunity to win another one, okay, in the next couple of years. You could even repeat next year potentially. And I understand there's a lot of things that have to get done. I have faith in the general manager, based on what he's done in the past couple of years, that he can get these things done without having to trade Nick Foles. And I understand the Eagles do not have a pick in the second or third round. That's, I understand all that. But there isn't a pick that if the Eagles do not make the playoffs because they started the year without Wentz and went 1-3 or 0-4 or even 2-2 for that matter, and don't make the playoffs because of it, there isn't a pick in the world, okay, a late first rounder, second, third, is going to soothe the savage beast in Eagles fans, because there's going to come a time, everybody's happy right now about winning that Super Bowl, but, come November, December, when it's looking like we're not making the playoffs, a big difference there. And that's a big issue. And even this past season, the Eagles went 13-3. They tied their franchise record for wins, most wins in a season. Okay, and if not for, I believe it was a strength of schedule or whatever component tiebreaker that they happen to have over Minnesota, they don't have home field advantage. At 13-3, they still wouldn't have had home field advantage. So every game you win in the NFL is important. every single one. Okay, and for the Eagles, having home field advantage is beyond important, and the Vikings found that out. And the Vikings are in the same boat. They need to have home field advantage, in a playoffs to go, because that's an awful tough place to play in, and you factor in that defense and everything else. So in my mind, I don't trade Foles. I hold on to him. You wait, you go through camp. You never know. These non-contact injuries and guys blowing knees, you could have a team that thinks they're a playoff team lose their quarterback at the end of training camp, like with Bridgewater, Tannehill with the Dolphins last year. And then suddenly you got a market for Foles. Then by that time, you know what you have with Sudfeld, and you're going to know exactly, for the most part, when Wentz is coming back. So keeping with the NFL theme, let's talk a little bit about Kirk Cousins. In his Final Four. Now, that may have gotten whittled down, but the Final Four, as we like to, against March Madness and NCAA tournaments coming up, and Selection Sunday's coming up this coming Sunday. So the Final Four for Kirk Cousins, okay? You've got the Minnesota Vikings, okay? Number 2 seed in the NFC this past season. Right now, probably the favorites to win the NFC title next year. Case Keenum got them to the doorstep of greatness, as they say. Unfortunately, losing in Philadelphia. You've got the Arizona Cardinals, the team that I actually liked for Cousins. The weapons are still there, the nice defense, a team that I think with a quarterback could win. I think they could actually step up and play. And then you've got the Jets and the Broncos. And of the 4, the Jets may have the most money available, and they've got the market. You can, talking about each of these, the Jets in terms of a market, certainly can pay Cousins a lot of money, which per year he got in Washington. So I don't know if money's going to be the most significant thing with him. I don't know, is he valuing the contract dollars, or is he valuing the opportunity to win and have, solid weapons to throw to and whatnot. But the Jets can come at him with, you've got a great fan base. You've got a lot of money you can throw at him. And with that does come expectation. Endorsement deals up there for a New York quarterback, especially a Jets New York quarterback, absolutely could go through the roof for him. He could be marketed all over the place up there and make a ton of money in endorsements on top of the contract. Now, the issue I have with both the Jets and Broncos, I don't think either team's ready to win in the next couple of years. And quite honestly, you've got 2 coaches, and this is my opinion. You've got 2 coaches that are actually going to be coaching for their jobs this year, okay? And Bowles and Vance Joseph. Do you want to sign a long-term deal with a team that maybe in a year or 2 is going to have a new head coach? With it comes a new system, new offensive coordinator, the whole 9 yards. So that's another thing for him to think about as well is, do I want to commit to a team, take the money, but I don't know what this organization is going to be like in a year or 2. We've already talked about Arizona. With Cousins in there, that team could actually be a playoff contender. And then you've got Minnesota, who has everything already there, and all they need is a quarterback. And Cousins could certainly be the guy. He's not won a playoff game. Had an opportunity to go back to the playoffs the end of 2016 and lost to the Giants. I think he threw 235 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks in a big game. That's what you're going to get in a big game. You really want to throw $30 million a year at this guy, because that's about what he's going to get. And with the Jets, they're reporting front loading the contract, so he gets about $60 million in the first year. I mean, it's ridiculous what quarterbacks are getting these days. So we'll stay tuned to see what happens. I mean, that's going to be a very interesting thing. And once Cousins' market, once he's done, not once the market's set, I'm sorry, once he decides where he's going to go, I think that will then have a lot to do with, will a team come to the Eagles and offer something for Foles? And, again, his issue with Foles is just you don't know what you're going to get. Yeah, his regular seasons just have been Jekyll and Hyde at best. So I think some teams are a little wary of that. Can he replicate the playoff run over a 16-game season, and can he stay healthy over a 16-game season? He's also not done that. So don't want to say anything bad about Nick Foles. He got my team a Super Bowl, and I'm very happy about that. But looking at the business side of things, is Foles just a great backup, or can he be a useful starter? I don't know. There's rumor that Case Keenum could end up with the Denver Broncos. Good for him. I thought he had a great story there. I've never been a Case Keenum fan. Wasn't a Case Keenum fan through the whole year in Minnesota. Just kept waiting for him to fail. It happened in the NFC Championship game. But he certainly showed a lot this year in terms of progression and how much better he got from previous years. So, we'll see what he gets in terms of a contract. Maybe it's with Denver. Maybe he ends up in Arizona. Maybe that's a possibility. Maybe if Cousins goes to the Vikings, maybe the Jets throw a few dollars at him. Well, again, we'll see. It's going to be very interesting free agent period, and that starts on March 14th. So any of you who got my show, the midweek show last week, heard my rant about the Phillies and Jake Arrieta and everything. And I heard on the news or the radio report, it was from Howard Eskin, WIP actually broke it, that the Phillies have not been in contact with Jake Arrieta for the better part of 3 weeks. They're not moving off a 3-year deal, which is what I think they put on the table. So they're just going to wait it out. And there's also talk that the Phillies actually may just see how the season goes and see what they can get if they're close, see what they can get at the trade deadline. So no Arrieta to Philadelphia, at least not at this point. It's very, very the marriage I see that could be happening because it's Scott Boras would be in Washington. I could see the Nationals at the last minute going and offering him a deal to bring him to the Nats. Yeah, I've said it time and time again here, and it's just, why do you want a 32-year-old pitcher, again, who, every meaningful, measurable statistic has gone the opposite way since his breakout year in 2015? It just doesn't make sense. I'm not into giving a guy tons of money to come in here and teach his staff all about winning. They're not. The Phillies aren't ready to be there, and we've discussed it and everything else. And now you're hearing about Scott Kingery, the second baseman for the Phillies, having a really good spring, and basically, they've already said no matter how he does, he's going to start the year out at AAA because you don't want to start the arbitration clock. The Phillies, although this is a different regime, they learned that the hard way with Ryan Howard. He got arbitration, I believe, a year earlier than he would have if they had just kept him down a little bit longer. It happens all the time. The Rays did it with Evan Longoria. The Cubs did it with Bryant. And there was one report I heard this morning. The Phillies did it with Macau Franco a couple of years ago, and they're saying there might be some lingering, animosity because of that. Well, it didn't seem to affect Bryant. He seems to be playing real well. Longoria had, some tremendous years with the Rays. So if that's really bothering Franco, get over it. That's the business side of baseball. That's what your union collectively bargained for. So you know what? Tough. That's exactly how I look at it. Tough. If that's what's really bothering you, shut up and swing the bat and get back to where you were a few years ago, and you will get paid. But that's the whole thing with Kingery, and they don't need to bring him up. They really don't. They have no reason to do it. They've got Hernandez to play second base. If they want to bring him up midseason, use him off the bench, kind of like what Chase Utley's role was when they had Polanco here. That's fine. But yeah, they have no reason to bring him up. You don't want to start the clock on these guys any earlier than you need to, because the arbitration starts earlier and you lose that year to then go free agent. It actually accelerates everything. So I'm all for giving him a great taste of the major leagues here in spring training, seeing what he's got, and just tell him play great at AAA, and your call will come. So before we talk about the National League Central, it looks like the Mariners are going to bring back Ichiro. Outfielder started his major league career here with the Seattle Mariners. Looks like it's a 1-year major league deal, so they're going to actually have to release someone off their 40-man roster to make room for him. So I believe they're going to be down Gamble for 4 to 6 weeks. Hannigan hasn't played at all, or Haniger has not played at all in the spring, and Heredia, I believe, is coming off shoulder surgery. There you go. So Ichiro would allow some depth for the Mariners, and nothing else, sell some tickets. He's got 3,080 hits in the majors over here. So 44 years old. Looks like he's headed back to Seattle. So we're talking about the National League Central Division, division that the Chicago Cubs have pretty much owned the last few years. Narrowly missed out on the pennant in 15. got there, got beat by the Mets. 2 years ago, as we all know, came back and won the World Series, the first time in like 100 years. And then last year got off to a real slow start. Clearly, the World Series hangover was hanging in there, but they got hot late, and they came back. The Brewers had led the division, and then the Cubs came, took it over, and got back to the playoffs. So that's where we stand. The Cubs, if you're looking at the PECOTA rankings, or from baseball perspectives, they've got the Cubs winning 92 games and winning the division again. They've got the Cardinals and Brewers pretty much locked second and third, 85 and 84 wins respectively. Cardinals won 83 games last year. The Brewers finished second with 86 wins a year ago. So we'll quickly talk about each of these ball clubs and where we think they're going to end up. The Cubs are still the class of the Central. You've got two MVP candidates on this team in Bryant and Rizzo. Key cogs in that lineup. Schwarber came back last year and played and hit 30 home runs, but it reminds people of Dave Kingman defensively out in left field. Great promotion for the Cubs. You have a dual bobblehead, Schwarber on one side and Dave Kingman on the other. Both played left field there, obviously. I'm not really sold on Schwarber, I'll be honest with you. In my mind, not a Joe Madden kind of player. They did hit 30 home runs last year, but 211 was the batting average. And he's a butcher in left field. He is really terrible. But they've got great defense at second base and Baez. Addison Russell is as good as they come in the National League at shortstop. Both guys have great power. They got a wonderful catcher in Contreras. Hayward hasn't exactly been spectacular, but he's been at least solid. And it looks like they're going to go with Almora Jr. and Happ in center. They have Almora slated to be the leadoff hitter, so we'll see how that goes. But they've got still a solid lineup in Chicago. Most of their pitching came back. They signed Yu Darvish to replace the departed Arrieta. They got Tyler Chatwood in here. They traded for Quintana last year. Still got Lester at the top of the rotation. Kyle Hendricks, who just a few years ago had just an outstanding season for him. It's going to be interesting to see Chatwood. He's getting out of Colorado. He always seemed to pitch pretty well there. There's a lot of ground balls, which with this defense is exactly what you want to do. It'll be very interesting to see what he does, with a really good team in the Cubs, and see if he finally breaks through and has one of those big seasons. The only real question mark, Wade Davis is gone. It was the closer. They've got Brandon Morrow. They brought in to be the closer. It's going to be interesting to see if he can do that. He was 6-0 for the Dodgers last year as a setup guy. So now he's going to get handed the ball to be the closer, and it's a whole different ball game getting those big outs in the ninth inning than it is coming in the seventh or eighth and putting out a fire and giving the ball to Kenley Jansen to knock it down for you. So that's really, as I see this, the only question mark that the Cubs really have. So St. Louis Cardinals always seem like they're in the mix. They finished third last year, as I already stated. Nice lineup. They just locked up their shortstop, Paul DeJong, 5-6 years after a fine year last year. But they're gonna have Fowler in the lineup, on base machine. They made a huge trade to bring in Marcell Ozuna, who had 37 homers, drove 124 runs last year in the Miami Marlins lineup. And that's awesome production, given the fact that Giancarlo Stanton was in the same lineup. So he's going to hit cleanup for the Cards. As soon as a fantastic outfielder, cannon for an arm, he'll go right in the middle of that lineup. You got Tommy Pham in center field, who's a solid player. Carpenter's always been a great player, big doubles machine, does have some power. He'll be playing first base, which really is the perfect position for him. He's been miscast as a second baseman and a third baseman over the years. Still got Yadi Molina, not the hitter he was a few years ago. Still an outstanding catcher. Still can throw runners out, can pick you off at first base, and calls a really good game still. Colton Wong, I've always liked. Solid defensive second baseman. Maybe a little unspectacular, but solid, but really good defensively, and he can hit a little bit as well. So you've got those guys, and you've got Jed Jorko, who's just going to go over, play third base, and just hit home runs, basically, is what he does. The pitching could be a little dicey. You've got Carlos Martinez at the top of the rotation. He won 12 ball games last year, as did Wacha and Wainwright. They're the top three pitchers. You really want to see Martinez have that breakout season. They've been talking about it for a few years. He pitched 200 innings last year. He won 12 games, but you want to see him just go off and have that breakout season. that you want to see a young pitcher have. Maybe win 17, 18, 19 games, really take control of that rotation. That would go a long way for the Cardinals in terms of getting into the playoffs. After that, you got Luke Weaver, went 7-2 in 10 starts. Got Miles Mikolas, who won 14 games over in Japan last year. And again, a huge question mark here for the Cardinals is their closer, Luke Gregerson. He was 31 saves for the Astros in 15. Struggled in the playoffs that year. I think he had 16 saves 2 years ago. Had one save last year. It was an awful season. So that's who the Cardinals are going to turn to, at least in the beginning of the season. So, keep your eyes on that. We'll see what goes. The Cardinals always seem to be in the mix. They may not win the division, but they certainly are going to be in the mix for a wild card. Could even be the first wild card out of the National League. So, we'll keep our eyes on the Cardinals. Next up are the surprise National League team from last year, which would be the Milwaukee Brewers. They won 86 games last year. They're projected to win 84 games. If there's a team I'd actually take the under on, it's going to be the Milwaukee Brewers. They went out and made a huge deal for Christian Yelich, which cost them their number one prospect in Lewis Brinson. But Yelich does come over here with 5 years control. He's a solid player, could play left and center. So that'll add a bit of a punch to the Brewers lineup. They went and signed Lorenzo Cain to a long-term deal, which, the back end of that contract, we'll see what Cain has left at that point in time. But at least for the first couple of years of the contract, that should be really good. So you've got Yelich in left, you've got Cain in center. In right field is Santana, who only broke out last year, hitting about 30 home runs for the Brewers. He'll take control of right field for the Brew Crew this year. The moves for Yelich and Cain kind of pushed Keon Broxton to a fourth outfield position on the team. A 2020 guy a year ago, 20 home runs, stole 21 bases, does not walk a lot, only walked 40 times, 414 at bats, hit 20 home runs, 49 RBIs. Very good defensively, so he'll be the fourth outfielder on this ball club this year. There are question marks on this ball club too. I mean, Eric Thames played first base. He off to a hot start. I mean, had a real hot April. Kind of limped down the stretch a bit, and still managed to hit 31 home runs for the Brewers. We'll see what he does this year. There's talk of platooning him at first base with Ryan Braun, the former superstar of the Milwaukee Brewers. So, we'll see if Thames is for real. See if he can do what he did last year again. You have Shaw at third base, and again, going to be interested to see if he can repeat his numbers from a year ago, 31 home runs and driving in 100 runs. Arcia is a fantastic young shortstop. He had a nice second year up with the Brewers last year, so he should continue to improve. A good glove guy. They get about 14 home runs for the Brewers. Second base is just a black hole. You've got the veteran Eric Sogard, who was completely out of baseball 2 years ago. I believe it was due to an injury of some sort. Came back, had a nice, part of a year last year. Jonathan Villar, 2 years ago, hit close to 290 with like a 360-something on-base percentage, 30-some doubles, 19 homers, and stole 62 bases. His batting average dropped to 240. His on-base percentage dropped about 70 points down to 290. Home runs down to 11. His stolen bases down to 23. So, which Villar are you going to see there? And, his lack of production and the fact the Brewers were in the race was why they went out and traded for Neil Walker, who remains unsigned right now. So, Walker actually would be a really good fit on this ball club because he could play multiple positions. He liked playing there a year ago. He's a switch hitter. So, again, season hasn't started yet. It's very possible he could come in. You had a rotation. Chase Anderson's probably the guy who pitched the best last year. He only made 25 starts, but he probably was the best pitcher of the bunch, going 12-4, had a whip of just over 1. You have Julius Chacin, who had a very nice comeback season for the Padres last year. He won 13 games for a terrible Padres team last year, 32 starts. Proved he was durable and able to make 30-plus starts last year. Zach Davies had a breakout year, winning 17 games, going 33 starts last year. But again, is Chacin going to be able to replicate what he did last year in Milwaukee? Is Davies for real? Is at 17-9 what he's really going to do or what he's capable of? So you kind of have those questions there. Suter is a starter on this ball club this year after kind of being a swing man last year. 14 starts, 22 appearances, 3-2. Nothing special. They brought Gallardo back. We'll see what he can. We'll see what he's able to do. He went 5-10 in Seattle, a very high ERA in 22 starts. Certainly not the pitcher he was many years ago. And Jimmy Nelson is still recovering from shoulder surgery last September. So see what happens there. Knievel is their closer. 39 saves and 45 opportunities last year. 1-4, 178 ERA is durable. Went 76 games last year. They've got a lockdown guy in the back of the bullpen that at least two other teams don't have. But if there's a team, if you're looking at the over-unders on some of these win totals, the Brewers are one ball club really could go under. I think they caught some teams by surprise last year, and I just don't believe that they're going to be in the mix for this division. Could they be a wild card team? Yeah, they could. But a lot of things are going to have to go right for them this year, and we'll see how that all works out. And now we reach into the bottom of the division. Start with the Pittsburgh Pirates. Finally, were able to trade McCutchen away. He went to the Giants, and they traded Garrett Cole to the Houston Astros. Now, the deal with the Astros to get Colin Moran and Joe Musgrove back. So Moran is slated to be the starting third baseman. So he had 308 with a 9.16 on-base plus slugging percentage last year, AAA. Should be the Pirates' everyday third baseman. They still have David Freese, who had a nice year last year, but he's going to be the backup on the two corners at third and first. Joe Musgrove, I think, just needed an opportunity to pitch, which he'll get in Pittsburgh. Their top three guys in the rotation look to be Jamison Tyone, Ivan Nova, and Musgrove, and then Chad Kuhl, Trevor Williams kind of fill out the five-man rotation. But also look for Tyler Glasnow and Stephen Brawl. Now, they both had sub-2 ERAs in AAA last year. Glasnow got a taste of the majors last year, did not pitch that great. But, I think that one or both those guys could swoop in at some point, if not to start the season, after the season starts, if anybody were to struggle in that ball club. So that's where they are. Gregory Polanco, to me, is a huge guy on this ball club. You're looking at a guy that 22 home runs, 34 doubles 2 years ago. Not going to walk a ton, but great defensive guy in the corner, great arm, a lot of tools. Be nice if he could walk a little bit more. But he was hurt last year, didn't steal a lot of bases like he did the year before. So if he can have a return to form from 16, then he could really do some wonders for this Pirate team that after years and years and years of being in the abyss, finally cracked through and got into the playoffs for a few years there, and then now are kind of back to that retooling phase of things. You had Bell at first base last year. Yeah, a solid year, 26 doubles, 26 dingers, 6 triples, drove in 90 runs, seems to walk a bit. He was not thought of as a big power guy, maybe doubles power, not home run power, but he did hit 26 home runs last year. So, he should get better in terms of his batting average and everything. So, we'll see how he goes as the time goes on. And they've got the veterans in the middle of the diamond and Harrison and Jordan Mercer. Both are solid, if not as spectacular. They both also could find new homes by the trade deadline if they're having any kind of good season, if the Pirates are really out of it. They'll have Starling Marte in center field this year, hopefully for a full season. He got suspended last year for the PEDs or whatnot. And then you've also got Corey Dickerson, who came from the Rays in a deal after he was designated for assignment, got traded over to Pittsburgh. So, that's where you have with the Pirates again. Pacoda has them 74, 75 wins. I think they're probably the last place team in this division, and I think they're going to be I take the under on their win total, figuring they're going to win maybe anywhere from 67 to 69 games. Now you have the Cincinnati Reds, 68-94 a year ago. They're a ball club that could win in the low to mid 70s this year. Still got Joey Votto, an obvious MVP candidate. You got Billy Hamilton, outstanding defensive center fielder, just runs all over the place. You've got Suarez playing third base, but you still got Nick Senzel, who's the number 2 pick from 16. He could come up at some point this year for the Reds, depending on how they're doing. You got a Gold Glove catcher, Tucker Barnhart. You still have Mesoraco, who was a starter from a few years back, who unfortunately has been injured, not able to play. So your catching seems to be in very good hands. Barnhart's an excellent catcher. Not a big bat, 7 home runs, whatnot last year, but certainly a fantastic defensive catcher, as indicated by that Gold Glove. Some other bright spots offensively for the Reds. You got Scooter Gannett. I mean, did the Brewers give up on this guy just a year or two earlier or what? Here's a guy who comes in 27 dingers, 97 RBIs, playing second base, 295 batting average. So you don't think the Brewers could be using that kind of production at second base right about now? So you have that in the outfield. You got Adam Duvall, another year, 31 home runs, 99 RBIs. Again, guy's not going to walk a ton, but certainly he's going to hit the ball out of the ballpark for you. You still got Hamilton out in center field, who again tracks down just about everything, steals a lot of bases. He's got Schebler, who played 141 games and they hit 30 home runs for the Reds. So they're going to get some. They're going to score some runs. The problem here is going to be the starting pitching. You've got Desclafani, you've got Finnegan, Bailey, who's been hurt. You got Castillo, and then Sal Romano. Former starter Raciel Iglesias is the closer, and he was able to convert 28 out of 30 last year. There was a lot of talk that he might go to a playoff contender at the deadline, whether it be the Dodgers, maybe the Nationals, any of those teams that were involved at the time. So the Reds, if they can get any kind of pitching, and they're very fortunate they're in the same division with the Pirates right now, they'll score runs, they'll hit a bunch of homers, and probably, again, they'll finish in fourth place in this division, and I figure they'll probably win 72 to 73 ball games. So that's the National League Central. I like the Cubs to win this division again and go deep into the playoffs. I think the Cardinals, the Cubs have any kind of bad luck, and with bad luck I mean injuries, or they just don't play well like they did the first half of last year. The Cardinals certainly could slide in there. If the Brewers have a bunch of things go right again for them, and that hole at second base is just, it's awful. Counting on Sogard, who just a couple of years ago was out of baseball due to being injured. Unless they get a bounce back season from Villar like it did 2 years ago, then that's very, very possible. You got to like Yelich out there, and Kane, great defensive out. 2/3 of that outfield is fantastic defensively. Santana is a capable outfielder. Certainly great production last year, 30 home runs, slugged over 500. Thames and Braun at first base. And it's funny to talk about our Brewer team without even really getting into Ryan Braun, who just is not the same player he was a few years ago. But, Thames at first base, love Arcia at shortstop. If not for Addison Russell, this guy's probably the best shortstop in the division, to be honest with you. But I like the Cubs. The Cardinals and Brewers I see in the wild card mix, although I think the Cardinals are the team that could overtake the Cubs if things go wrong in Chicago. But, I do believe the Cubs win this division, 92, 93 wins. I think the Cardinals are a high 80s win team. And I think the Brewers, again, I don't see them winning the same number of games they won a year ago. I know they went all in. They made the trade to get Yelich. They made the big free agent signing in Kane. But I see them taking a step back this year. So we'll see how that all goes for them. So that's going to do it for Episode 10. Thanks again for listening, downloading, whether you got it on the APN Radio Network or you got it through Libsyn or through Apple Podcasts. Again, the Twitter handle is @BigGreek24. Email address is victorlogo13@gmail.com. The Sports Greek has a Facebook page. And don't forget that we contribute to Philly Sports Blogs, which is phillysportsblogs.com, as well as All Pro Nation, which is allpronation.com. Stay safe out there if you're on the East Coast and being affected by this snowstorm that's supposed to rip through here overnight tonight into tomorrow and possibly ending Thursday morning. And try and have a great week, and we'll do it again next week. Thanks again.